All right, looks like we're connected. So second day in a row doing the whole live thing. Not sure if I like it. It seems like it doesn't sound as good when I listened to it yesterday. And also nobody commented. So I don't know. We'll see. Maybe I'll just do them not live. I usually do them in one take anyway. But here we go. I have some notes from Ms. Druckenmiller. She sent me an email. She has a video on entropy that she wants me to post and a note catcher. So once I'm all done here, that is going to be uploaded to you all. Oh, hi. I hope everybody's doing okay. Keep washing your hands, keep cleaning surfaces. Stay away from other people as much as you can, and keep on talking to each other. You all got your phones and computers and whatnot. Stay in touch. All right, so I admittedly have not found success in my idea I had yesterday. I made the form for you guys to fill out to see if anybody was interested in the book club idea. And I got 0 responses, which is okay. My feelings aren't hurt. I'm just trying to come up with ideas of things for you guys to do. If that's not it, that's not it. I will give folks another day. So if you had intended on trying to get in on the video chat today, we will postpone that. I'll see if anybody fills out the form on the blog today, and then we'll go from there. I will say, after rereading all of the preface and the first chapter of The Color of Law, a few things that I noticed that might sway you a little bit. The preface is very dense. I feel like usually when you read a book, the preface is a little more airy and not as complicated as the rest of the book. But if you did try to read it, you'll notice there's a lot of focus on Supreme Court cases. I think if you didn't really have any context for any of it, you might have found yourself having to search up some of the things that he was writing about. So if you looked at it and you were like, ugh, look at the first chapter. The book is very readable. It's really a lot of it is based on stories, on interviews that he did with people, whereas the preface really doesn't read that way at all. I will do kind of a quick overview of what was in the preface on today's video. And then hopefully, if more folks are interested, we can try to use the Zoom thing maybe tomorrow. Maybe I'll give it a couple school days to see if anybody's interested. If they're not, I'll try to come up with something else that folks might be interested in trying out. So with my read on that first chapter, or excuse me, on the preface, I'll hold off on the first chapter for now. Some of the laws and court cases that were focused on, and topics. He did focus a lot on de jure versus de facto segregation. So normally when we look at that, de jure is when people are separated based on law or government action, whereas de facto is usually defined, is usually defined as being separation based on like private and personal decisions. So kind of like of fact, like that's just how it is. That's what people did. That's why people moved. So basically what Rothstein does in the preface is he kind of makes the argument that, one, a lot of the things that usually get described as being de facto are actually things that are sanctioned by and caused to happen by actions of the government directly. He kind of goes through a few things. He talks about the 13th Amendment. He talks about specifically the Civil Rights Act of 1866, where he talks about how the actions of Congress it prohibits the actions of Congress that um, that perpetuated the characteristics of slavery. So basically, like, Congress can't do anything, people can't do anything that perpetuates characteristics of slavery. So sort of extending the meaning of the 13th Amendment, not just ending slavery, but also trying to end anything that perpetuates the characteristics of slavery. He also talks about how our our housing and the segregation that we are looking at now, that it goes against the Fifth Amendment, that it goes against the 14th Amendment, that it goes against the Fair Housing Act of 1968. And when he lays out sort of his argument, which I guess makes sense for the preface of a book, he lays out his argument basically saying that across the political spectrum, segregation, modern segregation, or the separation of different groups of people, is accepted as being de facto. You know, like, oh, like, people choose to live with people who are like them, et cetera, et cetera. He's arguing against that. And he's saying that desegregation and reversing de jure segregation, it's not just like desirable policy, things that like he wants, but what his argument is that it is an obligation. It's something that we have to do, both on moral grounds and also on constitutional grounds. And he also plans to argue against the idea or the decisions made by the Supreme Court, where they're saying that segregation is based on private individual choices. He is saying that it is not. There were a couple of kind of neat examples in the beginning, and this is something that I've thought about quite a bit. And this probably would be something I'd be interested in talking to you guys about. So specifically, he was talking about Detroit, and how in Detroit, one of the things that came to the courts was that they were trying to argue that basically they'd created kind of this black ghetto in the core of Detroit, but that in the surrounding communities, in the predominantly white communities surrounding it, there was a big difference in terms of like services, obviously in terms of demographics. And what they were pushing to do in Detroit at that time was they wanted to read the language of desegregation, in terms of like what was expected by the law. What they wanted to do was they wanted to integrate, not just take the core of Detroit, like Detroit public schools, because it was almost all Black students at that time, but they were saying, why aren't we integrating these sort of surrounding suburbs? Why aren't we mixing and mingling those groups? So my connection there, thinking about like where we live in Western Mass, can you imagine an integration of schools? Can you imagine if we went to sort of a more regional model, where kids from Springfield were going to school in Wilbraham or Longmeadow, and kids from Longmeadow and Wilbraham were going to school in Springfield, and where you went to school wasn't determined by where you live. And if that would be something that could affect some sort of change. That's what it made me think about immediately in that piece. So I thought that might be a cool thing to talk about if anybody cares to do so at another time, once we get a couple more people on board, if we do. The end of the preface, he kind of talks about terminology, talks about how like the term African American, the term Black, previous terms that were used for that group of people, and then also words like diversity and words like ghetto, and the little read at the end of the section. Oh, hey, Sauerkraut. You're not on the screen. Sauerkraut's here. I'm sure that at least 50% of the reason that the 6 of you are watching is so you can see Sauerkraut. You got anything to say, bud? You just want me to put you down, huh? You just want to go back to sleep? Do you care about this stuff? What do you think about segregation? Were you listening? Not even a little bit? You're mad. Okay, go back to sleep. Say goodbye. Goodbye. Oh, and he's not playing. Okay. Where was I? The the quote, he does give sort of a thesis or, oh, bud. Good boy. He does give sort of his like overall, like, this is why I'm writing the book. And I wrote that down. Where'd it go? So he wrote, the core argument of this book is that African Americans were unconstitutionally denied the means and the right to integration in middle class neighborhoods. And because this denial was state sponsored, the nation is obligated to remedy it. Okay. So talked about that a few minutes ago, this idea that what's happening, what has happened with segregation in the United States is wildly problematic. And then also that not only should we do something, but that we have to do something. So I'll pause there. I see Adia is asking me something here. How do we convince people who are oblivious to this issue that is not a happy coincidence? It's a sad coincidence. That AP classes are super white despite our school being heavily Latinx and pretty black. That's a good question, Audio. Having not taught AP classes yet, I am not super familiar with what the demographic looks like. I definitely know, I don't know, did you talk to Friedler about this last year at all? Because I know that she had talked about this, obviously. I think she went to school in Boston or Cambridge, if I remember correctly. But she talked about that, like in her experience, like going to a pretty diverse school. I don't know if their demographics were very similar to ours or not, but that when she was in AP classes, that was her experience too. Just rereading your question again. That is really interesting. So the idea that I wonder if I could get, because I assume that Friedler is also distancing or on lockdown. I don't know what her situation is right now, but I could try to right. Yeah. I mean, people always like to say that like education is the key to those things. But obviously it's more complicated than that. Yeah, I would love to reach out to her and see. I don't know how Zoom integrates into streaming or into YouTube, but it might be kind of cool to get her in on a conversation. Her having had that experience. I try not to talk too much about things that I don't feel like I have a ton of experience or knowledge about. But I'm more than happy to listen. So I'm gonna probably tune out. We're approaching 15 minutes here. If either of you, Rochelle or Adia, are interested in the book thing, like I said, if you want to look at the first chapter and maybe talk to some other folks, like I said in the beginning, I'm not upset by it if that's not something that folks are into. But I do like the idea of the Zoom thing. I do like the idea of the like larger group video chat. If that book isn't it, I think that having some sort of structure or some sort of guiding document, even if it's like an article or whatever, I think that would be I think that would be better than just kind of free flowing. Oh, hey, buddy. All right, so please feel free to email me. I'm gonna take a few minutes and work on that post for 11th graders. And like I said, I'm happy to correspond over email, happy to correspond over Remind. I'm gonna keep on doing these little videos to check in with folks. And I hope you guys have a great day. Keep washing your hands, keep away from people, social distance. Don't watch the news too much, and just be smart and try to take care of your people. All right, over and out.